Sometimes doing what's important means doing what's hard.
And that when it gets to election day, that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country.
Kristi Noem, along with her ICE thugs, have made very clear in the past couple of weeks and months that their goal is to change the polls themselves.
South Park went absolutely wild on Trump and Kristi Noem because they did not need jokes, they needed subtitles. When Noem stood there and said her job is to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders, that was the punchline. South Park, all they did was they just animated it. They took her exact tone and they showed how it sounds when you remove the PR polish. It sounded like a government picking its own voters.
Or in the hallway.
President Trump, you are an incredible man. Whatever this is, we have your back.
That phrase exploded for a reason. The right people? What does that even mean? Who decides who is right? Is there a checklist somewhere at DHS? Do you get graded before you step into the voting booth? When a cabinet official says that on live television, it does not sound like election security. It sounds like control. South Park did not twist her words in the slightest. They held them up, and they let the country hear them clearly.
And elections is another one of those critical infrastructure responsibilities that I have as well. And I would say that many people believe that it may be one of the most important things that we need to make sure we trust is reliable, and that when it gets to election day, that we've been proactive to make sure that we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country.
And here's the part that makes it all so much worse. She said it calmly. There was no hesitation, no correction, no follow-up clarification. She talked about elections being critical infrastructure and needing trust. Then she slipped in that line about the right people voting. That is the kind of line South Park writes for a cartoon dictator. Except this time, it was real. It aired live. Nobody edited this. Nobody leaked it. It was just right there.
And there is a reason why she in particular feels so comfortable saying the quiet part out loud. Kristi doesn't care if it implicates her, Trump, or this entire administration.
Now let's talk about the ICE movement. Senator Elissa Slotkin asked a simple question. Could ICE be deployed around polling places? That should have been a one-word answer, and it should have been no. That's it. No. Instead, we got dancing, we got there is no reason, we got we do civil and criminal enforcement, we got a refusal to slam the door shut. Why leave that door open at all?
So I have to ask Mr. Lyons, do you believe that ICE has the authority to be deployed to U.S. polling places around the country?
So, ma'am, we're civil. Obviously, we do civil enforcement and criminal law enforcement.
The ICE official admitted Homeland Security Investigations handles voter fraud cases. That is different from surrounding polling places. Yet, when pressed about uniformed masked agents near voting lines, we did not hear a hard rejection. Why is that so difficult? If the answer is a never say never, if the answer is impossible, say impossible. The hesitation is what makes people nervous.
How in the world is the answer to the question of whether or not ICE will be going to the polls to intimidate voters not just a simple no? There is no gray, oh, well, we're not sure because maybe. What is the scenario?
And let's not pretend this came out of nowhere. Trump has openly talked about invoking the Insurrection Act. That law would allow active duty military deployment domestically. He has floated it around before. He has teased it. So when his administration refuses to rule out ICE near polling locations, people connect the dots. South Park connected those dots with flashing lights and also sirens.
If the President of the United States gets Kristi Noem on the phone and she gets you on the phone and she says, we've heard there's a problem in Georgia or in Michigan or somewhere else, I need you to go and physically deploy around polling locations. You will say no.
There's no reason for us to deploy, ma'am.
Well, then you should say no, right?
Yes, but just...
Think about the optics. Masked federal agents, polling places, election day. How does that help voter confidence? Who feels relaxed walking past armed officers to cast a ballot? Why even create the scenario where that question exists in the first place? South Park exaggerated it with cartoon troops circling a school gym. The scary part is how close that image feels to the rhetoric we just heard.
So Trump is saying of the SAVE Act that he doesn't care if Congress will pass it or not. He is going to do whatever it takes to move forward with his voter suppression.
Then there is Trump's SAVE Act push. He went on social media calling Democrats cheaters over voter ID. He said if Congress does not pass it, there are legal reasons he can move forward anyway. Wait a second. Republicans control both chambers. He has the majority, and he is still threatening to bypass Congress? What exactly is the emergency here?
Now, I'd really like to see something that ensures that ICE isn't just wearing a body cam when they go and steal your vote, but they are unable to do so. Kristi Noem said that we've been proactive to make sure we have the right people voting, electing the right leaders to lead this country.
He even hinted that he could strip legislative power if they do not move fast enough. That is not subtle. That is executive muscle flexing in public. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the power to legislate. Yet he talks like that is optional if he feels strongly enough. South Park would draw that as a giant red button labeled override democracy. He is practically describing it himself.
The President of the United States orders you to release custody of the prisoner to me immediately. I warned you I had powerful friends.
And this is why the satire hits so hard. You have a president saying he will move forward with voter laws whether Congress cooperates or not. You have a DHS secretary talking about the right people voting. You have ICE refusing to rule out presence near polls. Each piece alone raises eyebrows. Put them together and it becomes a storyline.
Now, this clip has obviously gone super viral, with Democrats like Dan Goldman responding saying the right people voting, they're not even trying to hide their intention to steal the election. We cannot give one more cent to DHS until Congress ensures our elections will be free and fair.
South Park thrives on absurd power grabs. They show officials who think they are heroes while quietly stacking the deck. When Kristi Noem uses language about ensuring the right leaders are elected, it feeds that narrative. It sounds like someone managing outcomes rather than protecting the process. That is why the clip went viral in just a few minutes. And let me ask you something. If your goal is to build trust in elections, why speak in a way that fuels suspicion? Why not say eligible citizens gets to vote? Full stop. Why not say federal agents will never intimidate voters? Full stop. Why leave wiggle room in the first place? The country hears wiggle room and they begin to think strategy.
Donald Trump, who has a majority in both houses of Congress, is telling Mike Johnson and John Thune, I will strip you of your power to make sure I can suppress the vote. And it is not just through legislative actions. Again, we know why Donald Trump has a standing army. It is because he wants to use it to intimidate.
South Park did what satire does best. It removed the formal background. It stripped away the podium. It took those exact words and it let them echo in a cartoon town. And suddenly, everyone could hear how strange they sounded. When politicians start sounding like parody, Parody becomes a documentary. Democrats like Dan Goldman and Mark Warner reacted immediately. They said it sounded like leaders selecting voters instead of voters selecting leaders. Now that reaction was predictable. When the head of Homeland Security talks about making sure that the right leaders are elected, well, people assume the government has preferences. And of course it does. Every administration has preferences. But the problem is when enforcement power sits next to that preference.
She will make sure they vote for the right leaders? ? And, strongly worded letter Chuck hopped in saying, this is Trump's idea of democracy. Leaders get to select their voters instead of the other way around.
DHS oversees election infrastructure as critical infrastructure. That means cybersecurity, protection, coordination with states. That is serious authority. Now add ICE to the conversation, add investigations to voter fraud, add a president who keeps claiming fraud in Philadelphia, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, and suddenly the language feels heavier. It does not feel like neutral oversight. It feels like positioning. And let's roast this gently, but at the same time, let's do it honestly. Kristi Noem talks like she is describing quality control at a factory. We need the right people voting. This is not a job interview. This is not a VIP list at a nightclub. This is constitutional right. The Constitution does not say only right vibes get in. It says citizens vote. Full stop.
He wants to become more politically powerful, no matter what laws stand in the way. He said that right here in this post before Kristi made her admission. It was just yesterday that Donald Trump threatened the entire Congress, saying that we cannot allow Democrats to get away with, and this is of course fake, no voter ID any longer. These are horrible, disingenuous cheaters, a lie, and they have all sorts of reasons why it shouldn't be passed, and then boldly laugh in the back rooms after their ridiculous presentations.
Now let's talk about this obsession with same-day voting and tighter windows. Trump has pushed hard against expanded early voting and mail ballots. He talks about chaos in big cities. He repeats fraud claims even when courts dismiss them. Why compress everything into one day if your goal is smooth participation? Why create a single pressure point? When voting stretches across weeks, it spreads risk. It spreads turnout. It reduces long lines. When you jam it all into one day, every disruption becomes amplified. One power outage, one protest, one rumor, suddenly headlines begin to explode. If you are a politician who thrives on chaos narrative, that is useful. South Park would show characters screaming while officials declare an emergency.
Attorney General Pam Bondi, who said that the president is a great man, even if he does eat his own semen.
Trump has already built the narrative. He calls certain cities corrupt. He says certain states are rigged. So imagine election day. A long line forms in a city. He constantly attacks. Something minor happens. He declares a crisis. Federal presence increases. That is the scenario critics fear. That is why the ICE question matters so much. Kristi Noem's language feeds that fear when she says they have been proactive to make sure the right people are voting. It sounds like pre-selection. It sounds like filtering. It does not sound like protecting access. If she meant something narrower, she did not say it clearly. And in politics, clarity matters more than intention. Now, zoom out on this a bit. Why does South Park hit harder than cable news? Because satire removes the political language, the polite language. Cable panels debate phrasing. Satire exaggerates the implication. When South Park puts those words into a cartoon mouth, people see the raw shape of them, and it becomes obvious how power can slide into control.
You see, I got a nut.
All right, you're hired. Take this to the next station for your physical and orientation video.
Cable news might write, DHS emphasizes election integrity. South Park writes, we will make sure the right people win. Which one feels closer to the emotional truth of that clip? This is why satire spreads faster. It bypasses party loyalty, it speaks to instinct, and instinct tells people that government officials should never sound like referees picking the winners.
He cannot win unless he cheats, and they are well aware of that. And they'll write it off as, the peace is being disturbed in Philadelphia, or there were problems with protesters in Milwaukee. Why do you think Donald Trump wants same-day voting so badly?
There is also a media gap over here. Progressive digital platforms are pushing this story harder than legacy networks. Online commentators clip the phrase, they loop it, they slow it down, they ask the question everyone is thinking. Why would you phrase it in that way unless you believe that you have a role in shaping outcomes? South Park thrives when officials underestimate how their words really land all the time. They assume the audience will accept the official explanation. Instead, the audience hears tone, they hear power, they hear control. And once that perception forms, it sticks. You cannot easily walk back the right people voting. It just lingers.